So beautiful. Respect the black woman. Bam 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 bam. In a party one Saturday night, met this Rasta sister looking tight, dressed in khaki and she looked swanky. So I decided, well, I must rap with she. I said greetings. She said, hey Larry, let's take something. She told me one love I, so jamming. Both are we I read. Then I made a mistake. Touch the locks on she head. She said, don't touch her ass. Don't feel her ass. Your hand too fast. Why? All of the brothers love to do feel up, feel up. Hey! I just sister don't like to feel up, feel up. Don't touch her ass. Don't feel her ass. Your hand too fast. Mister, run your ass. Whoa, whoa. Hey! Bam, 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 bam. Black and beautiful and looking shy. I say this sister really look irie. A flowing locks running down her shoulder, resembling Nakia or the Queen of Sheba. If you're dancing, Mister, please don't touch me. I'm a princess who love decency. When I come to dance, give me a chance. Attention, don't be dance. She said, don't touch me ass. Don't feel me ass. Your hand too fast. Mister, run your ass. Why? All of the brothers love to do feel up, feel up. Hey! I just sister don't like to feel up, feel up. Don't touch me ass. Don't feel me ass. Your hand fast. Mister, run your ass. Oh God, I don't want you to touch my business like this. I don't want you to touch my business like that. Mr. Man, respect this black woman. I don't touch your private parts. I don't want you to touch my business. I don't want you to touch my business like that. Mr. Man, respect this black woman. I don't touch my private parts. Don't touch it. I am pushing sophistication. But I think every man.
Wait,
Rastafari.
another kind of dance.
I'm man forwarding to
The swappy dance. There are people swapping.
It's celebration,
Big procession for the first ever Rasta band. All Rasta brothers and the daughters will be on the heavy mass.
no more guarantee in the man.
Yes, everyone chanting hand in hand, and then we sing it. Brass mass is a high mass. In real class, we play with jazz. No bandy, and I don't know whiskey. Just whoa, whoa. Incense burning, people chanting songs of inspiration. Only I tell, strictly natural, from pumpkin to prohibition. But like a join the band, no see follow regulation, and we chanting Rasmus. Swapping help me sing now, man. In real class, we playing with jazz. No bandy, and I don't know whiskey. Where do? Everybody, there we go. Whoa, lamba, lamba, lamba.
they read the scripture, Samson never saw a Baba. So if the scriptures is true, Samson was a Rasta too. Cause it's them with red, with the cooking in the head. Cause the dreaded and the dreadlocks, with the ideas in the head chops. La la la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la. If someone steals money from the treasury, he's a Rasta first, let's get blamed. A German stole 2 million from my country. For suspect they call a Rasta's name. Yeah, they can't have peace no time. They always linking them with some crime. Is this I don't understand? They don't have the Ku Klux Klan. Was this dread, with the demon in the head? Was the dread and the dreadlocks, with the ideas in the head chops? La 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 la. No part of this country's constitution tell you how to look and what to wear. We must treat the Rastas like they are human, regardless to how they keep their hair. Yeah, but white please call the Rasta, Jones kill people in Guyana. So what we must say instead is a plenty dreadful head. Jones was red, cause he deal up with the dead. Cause he dreaded of the dreadlocks, with the ideas in the head chops. La 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 lo la, la 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 lo la, la 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 la, la 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 la. Dread, with the devil in the head. Cause they dreaded of the dreadlocks, with the ideas in the head chops. Jones was dread, cause he deal up with the dead. Cause he dreaded of the dreadlocks, with the ideas in the head chops. The clan with dread, with the demon in the head. Cause they dreaded of the dreadlocks, with the ideas in the head chops. So look at that fella here, all the kind of clothes he does wear. It's the guys with the nice looks, it's them is the big crooks. So look at that fella here, all the kind, is this I don't understand? They don't have the Ku Klux Klan. Was this dread, with the demon in the head? Cause they dread out of the dreadlocks, with the ideas in the head chops. La 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 lo la, la 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 lo la, la 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 la, la 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 la. No part of this country's constitution tell you how to look and what to wear. We must treat the Rastas like they are human, regardless to how they keep their hair. Yeah, but white please call the Rasta, Jones kill people in Guyana. So what we must say instead is a plenty dreadful head. Jones was red, cause he deal up with the dead. Cause he dreaded of the dreadlocks, with the ideas in the head chops. La 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 lo la, la 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 lo la, la 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 la, la 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 la. This celebration, big procession for the first ever Rasta band. All Rasta brothers and the daughters will be on the heavy manners. No more guarantee the band. Everyone chanting hand in hand and they singing Rastas is a high mass, is real class. We play me jazz. Just feel free, everybody Irish. There we go. Incense burning, people chanting songs of inspiration. Only idol, strictly natural, from pumpkin to probation. Important to join the band. Don't see for a regulation when we chant in Rasmas. Is a high mass, is real class. We play with Jaja. No banfi, neither no whiskey. Just feel free, everybody. There we go. All the brethren and the sistrins form various sections. Who is canting, drinking something, is peace and love in the band. No kind of indecency. And we praising Marcus Garvey and we chanting Rasmas is a high mass, is real class. We play with Jaja. No banfi, neither no whiskey. Just feel free, everybody Irish. Rasmas is a high mass, is real class. We play with Jaja. No banfi, neither no whiskey. Just feel free, everybody Irish. Whoa, Rasmas. No whiskey. Hey, the Rasmus man, the mighty explainer Winston Henry, one of the greats. You know, we know about Kitchener and Sparrow as the great ones, and Rose as the great woman Calypsonian. But there's so many other Calypsonians who are equal to the others. You know, Sparrow and Kitchener. Yeah. You can say in a league by themselves. They've been blessed. I think it's Chocdas who said when God was giving gifts to Calypsonians, he gave the most to Sparrow. And I will say he gave the second most to Kitchener. But boy,
there are others. Explain something as a trilogy there. Trilogy celebrating the Rastafarians. And he was singing those calypsos at the time when our society was still skeptical about Rastas. We have come around now because all of us dread now. All of us dread now. We wearing the dread. We eating the ital. We using the language. This is a Rasta language, you know. And of course, we love reggae music, and reggae music comes out of the Rastafarian movement. Ras Nyabingi, Ras, not Nyabingi, the Nyabingi band from up in the hills of Jamaica came down in 1966. They played when Haile Selassie visited Jamaica, and boy, after then, Rasta music just went. But as you know, Rasta reggae music emerged in the early 1950s. A ska. In the early 1950s, of course, was a pivotal moment in Caribbean history. It was a time of decolonization. All the countries had been given a form of so-called self-government. We had the emergence of the West Indies cricket team beating England in England for the first time in 1950. We had the emergence of a whole host of Caribbean writers, Selvon and Lamin and Naipaul and Methaholzen, all of them emerging in the early 1950s. So the early 1950s was really a gathering of Caribbean genius, of course, pushed by the labor movement in the 1930s and 1940s. And then at the turn of the 1950s, we had all of this genius, political genius, artistic genius coming to the fore. And so reggae, as we know it was born, first as ska, and ska would have lasted from the early 1950s up until around 1968, and then between 68 and 69 for 18 months, what they call 18 glorious months, we transitioned from ska to rock steady. It's basically slowing down of the music and the upping of the bass and the lyrics. Of course, it was boy meet girl lyrics. And then 1969 transition into what we know as reggae, roots reggae. And then in the 1980s, transition from reggae to dancehall. But it's all, reggae is a generic term for all of the music. And it's Rasta music, the Rastafarian movement. And the Explainer, the only Calypsonian to have done a trilogy. Calypsonians have celebrated Rastafarians. But Explainer doing a trilogy there. Don't Touch Me Ras. It's a Don't Touch Me Ras. All your brothers like to do is feel up, but I is a woman I don't like to deal up. Really, again, using the Rasta movement to pay tribute to Black women and to say to Black men, you got to respect Black women, and say to all men that you've got to respect Black women. And, you know, that's why Calypso is such a great music. I think it's the greatest music that mankind has given itself, because it uses the Rasta movement. And you say, well, it's praising Rasta, but it's using the Rasta as the gaze to talk about respect for women. Don't touch me, Ras. And she's not talking about Ras, R-A-S-S, she's talking about Ras. Ras. Don't touch me, Ras, because it was a Rasta party. And, you know, um, uh, again, the double attach. You may think he said, don't touch me, Ras. Don't touch me, Ras. All of your brothers like to do is to feel up, but there is a woman don't like to deal up, you know? And so it's a song about respect for black women. It's a respect for black women, but using the Rastafarian movement. And then, of course, Rasmas, which is perhaps the most famous of the three. Rasmas, it's really about a Rasta, the first ever Rasta carnival. Only Ital, no Lotal, you know, no panty and none of that lawlessness. And the Calypsonian there again celebrating the uniqueness of the Rastafarian movement. But Bailey basically said, these people who we think are nasty, they're really clean spiritually. They're clean spiritually. It's just the message of the Ras. And they're partying and they're praising Marcus Garvey. No whiskey. No whiskey is provision in the past, right? And using again the Rastafarian movement to talk about the culture of the Caribbean, because the Rastafarian movement comes out of our Caribbean, you know, and to say, you know, all them whiskey and all them thing, them imported stuff. Now the Rasta man say, not a raya, right? We're gonna burn something, and we're gonna eat ital, and we're gonna drink Marby. And of course, the one that you may not know is dread. Dreader than the dreadlock. You know, if Samson, if the scripture is correct, you know, Samson never went to a barber. So Samson was a Rasta man. If you believe the scripture, you got to believe in Rastafari. And the Rastas will tell you that again, a synthesis or a synchronization, or we call it syncretism in the scholarship. You know, merging, fusing African religious traits with Christianity. That's what Rasta is, you know. Rasta is what we may call a folk religion, but it's more than a religion, it's a movement. But part of the movement is the religion, the folk religion. And by folk, we mean the religion that arises out of the experience of the ordinary folk. Some of us, you know, we call it a political religion, because the religion is overtly political. You see? So the Rastafari movement, you know, giving rise to new language, I man come forward, you know, forward in this time, you know, producing new language, producing new music, and this is all grounded in producing new fashion. You know, today we talk about the fashion dreads, you know. But all the language, ballad and all, come from the Rasta movement, you know. And we take it for granted. And as with everything else, there was a struggle. And that is what Explain is saying there, that we got to treat the Rasta with respect. Because, of course, the Rastafari movement emerged in the early 1930s with the coronation of His Majesty Haile Selassie in Ethiopia. And Garvey had predicted in a play that a king shall rise, an African king shall rise in the East. And so these ordinary people in Jamaica, viewed the coronation of Selassie as the fulfillment of Garvey's prophecy. And so they took the name Rastafari, which was Selassie's name, Rastafari. That was Selassie's name, and the Jamaicans, they took the name Rastafari, and they went up. They took land and went up to a hill in Jamaica called Pinnacle, 1,700 of them, and formed themselves into what we today call a commune. And thus was born the Rasta movement. The Rasta movement, and they went up there. They planted cash crops, brought it down to the market, and sell. In those days, they could sell marijuana, because although marijuana was considered by the white people to be not holy, but you could sell it in the open market back in the 1930s and the in Jamaica. And so the Rasta movement spawned a new era in the Caribbean culture. The man who founded that movement is a man called Claudius Henry, who's the first leader of the Rastafarian movement. You see, Garvey was the prophet. Selassie is the deity, and Claudius Henry was the first leader of the Rastafarian movement. So Claudius Henry, Marcus Garvey, Haile Selassie are the trilogy, when you talk about the emergence of the Rasta movement. And of course, the Rastas were persecuted and prosecuted in Jamaica. Claudius Henry was arrested and charged for madness. He was charged for being mad, because a man who was saying that there is a black God, the white colonials said, this man is crazy. How can there be a black God? These black people are inferior. There are no black God. And the jail charged him for madness. And of course, when he went to court, he refused to talk, or he was talking in tongues, and they were asking questions, and he would remain silent, and they sentenced him for madness. He eventually died in prison, Bellevue prison there in Jamaica. The first real prophet of the first leader of the Rastafari movement, Claudius Henry. Know that name. No, that name is not well known. We know Garvey, and Garvey himself, as you know, was persecuted and prosecuted in the United States for mail fraud. But again, they thought he was mad, because Garvey bought ships, and the ships were plying between Africa, America, and the Caribbean, buying and selling goods. The Black Star Line, it was called, the Black Star Line, and they felt he's crazy. And they locked him up and charged him for mail fraud. Eventually, he was served time, and then he was deported out of America. It's only last year that he was officially pardoned by Joe Biden. Joe Biden finally pardoned after almost 100 years, not almost, more than 100 years. So Garvey was jailed for madness. They call it mail fraud. And Claudius Henry was jailed for madness. And there are people who still think black people are mad. You know? No, I'm not making it up. He charged for madness in the 1930s in Jamaica. And of course, the movement maintained itself after Claudius Henry was jailed and he died. The followers still kept on the movement, and various Rastafari groups. In the 1950s, there were some young people who joined the movement, and they began to sing, and they became part of the Rastafari movement. And they would look at movies, and they would see the Mau Mau fighters in the jungle in Kenya. These were Kenyans fighting against the British for independence, because the British didn't want to give up Africa so easily. We know Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau, the Portuguese last left there. But the people in Kenya took up arms, went into the jungle, and were fighting. And these youngsters in Jamaica saw these men with the matted hair, knotted hair. And of course, they were in the jungle fighting, so they ain't got time to comb hair, and so the hair became matted and knotted. And they saw that, and they adopted it in Jamaica. And so the Rastas adopted this hairstyle from Kenyans, the Mau Mau Rebellion, and the Mau Mau Rebels, M-A-U. And at that time, they were fighting. The British had come into Guyana and suspended the constitution and jailed a number of the leaders, Martin Carter, Sidney King, etc. They were up there at Timeri. You remember this, those of you old enough remember the story that of the governor being in the house and seeing Sidney King in his house. He said, well, what this man is doing here, and this man's supposed to be locked up at what is now Atkinson Field up there. They locked them up there. But while they were in there, Carter and Guyana, but Sidney King he was then, and others, they went on a hunger strike in solidarity with the Mau Mau fighters in Kenya. Because the Mau Mau fighting there. So you see, there's a connection between the Mau Mau fighters, our struggle in Guyana for independence, and the Rastafari movement. And that's the Pan-Africanism that one is talking about. Martin Carter talks about the Mau in at least two of his poems, because he wrote most of the poems of resistance while he was in prison in 1953. Of course, we know the most famous poem there in the poems of resistance. This is the dark time I love. All around the land, brown beetles crawl about. He's writing to his wife. This is the dark time I love. Brown beetles is the British soldiers with their brown uniform, and the poet calls them brown beetles crawl about. The shining sun is hidden in the sky. Red flowers bend their heads in awful sorrow. Red was then the color of the socialist movement, the progressive movement. Red, a lot of the people. Red flowers, so Martin Carter talks about red flowers, he's talking about the masses. The people bend their heads in awful sorrow. This is the dark time I love. It's the carnival of misery. You see, that's what I talk about, the Caribbean genius. A carnival of misery. Take misery next to it. A carnival of misery. Everywhere the faces of men are strained and anxious. Who comes walking in the dark night time? Whose boot of steel tramps down the slender grass? The boot of steel is the soldiers. The slender grass, whose boot of steel tramps down the slender, is the strange invader. The strange invader watching you sleep and aiming at your dream. The greatness of Martin Carter, the product of Guyana, capturing in poetry. And you know, poetry is about the stingiest of the art forms, you know. You 4 verse, 6 verse, and you cram everything in there. So every word means something. The slender grass, whose boot of steel tramps down the slender grass, tramps down. It's a strange invader watching you sleep and aiming at your dream, watching you sleep. They tell us in Boston, you know, the soldiers would come in at Milwaukee to look for Guyana, and Guyana driving a car at company public road. So when they come in, he going out. And that is why there's the story of Guyana having mystical powers. Because the white people were baffled. They couldn't find me, you know. Some of us dare to ask Guyana the question. He never give me a straight answer. So many people tell me, must ask, brother, you see, if it's true, because not many people would dare ask Guyana that question. I think his son Kofi asked him too. I did ask him, you know. he gave one of his studied answers. but Martin Carter, I am arguing, is the greatest poetic voice of the African diaspora. I will put it even further, but the thing, and they were great poets, but he, you know, this is the dark time I love. I remember the school boy we thought was a love. It was a love poem, you know. Just as we thought that Bob Marley's No Woman, No Cry, my students always say it's a ballad, Dr. Hines, is a love until you explain to them. Oh, no, it's a very political song, you know. Martin Carter, the greatest. So, but in that poem of Poems of Resistance, to be, I think I have one of the original copies Guyana had given me way back in the 70s. Must have been about, because he had written a foreword to it, and he had a few copies and he gave to some of us. I think I have my copy till up to now. I think I have a little green book. But he has 3 letters there: letter 1, letter 2, and letter 3. These are letters he's writing to his wife. They just had a baby, you know, and oh boy, great poems. And so the Rastafari movement is very much part of our struggle for independence. It's the cultural aspect of our struggle for independence. So these young people start to wear their heads, their hair in locks. And that's where the locks came from. It came from the Mau Mau rebels in Kenya. In those days, we say Kenya. In Kenya, it came there only a few years ago. The British eventually compensated descendants of the Mau Mau rebels. because the British admitted that because they slaughtered a lot of the rebels, the Mau Mau rebels, and they admitted and they gave some compensation, I think. But the Rastas were also equally persecuted. In 1963, Alexander Bustamante, who was then the premier of Jamaica, prime minister of Jamaica, because they had gotten independence in 1962, and some men in locks had allegedly killed a gas station owner in Melbourne, Jamaica. And the government decided that the Rastas are evil. And Bustamante ordered the authorities to bring in Rastas dead or alive. Dead or alive. This is from the Jamaican prime minister. And of course, they brought in over 300 Rastafarians. Rastas had to be crawling in gullies and gutters at night to move from one place to the other because they were being hunted. They arrested over 300 of them, shaved their heads and beat them and so on. Recently, about 5 years ago, the Jamaican government gave an apology to the Rastafarian movement and to the relatives of those Rastafarians who were brutalized in 1963. Were brutalized, and I think they gave them compensation too, admitting that the government of the day, and it was a JLP government who did it to the Rastas, and I think it was Olness, a JLP prime minister, who gave, and they beat Rastafarians. You couldn't be seen if you were a Rasta. Could not be seen. And then there was the other story where a Jamaican an American who came to Jamaica and was preaching Rastafarianism, and he was jailed. He was Claudius Henry. The founder, Claudius Henry is the American who came. Claudius Henry, and he came from America, and began to preach a radical form of Rastafari, and they charged him for treason. They charged him for treason, and that caused some problems with the Rastafari movement also, and his son came and tried to get him out of prison, and so there were all kinds of problem around the Claudius Henry, but they pulled in Rastas. The real founder, I was confusing, give you the wrong name, it's not Claudius Henry's, Howell. He was the real founder of the Rastafari movement, Leonard Howell. He was the one that founded the movement, and he was the one that was charged for madness. Claudius Henry came later on, and he was charged with treason, and they pulled in a lot of Rastas. So Leonard Howell is the founder. I beg your pardon. Leonard Howell, the founder, leader, as they would say these days, of the Rastafari movement. Garvey, of course, the prophet. And then later on, as I said, Claudius Henry was an American who came, and they charged him for treason. And then 1963, the Melbourne incident. The Melbourne incident. The Rastas only began to get some recognition in Jamaica after Selassie visited in 1966. Visited Jamaica in 1966, and after he left, they began to get some recognition. Before that, the Rastas had made a representation to the University of the West Indies because they argued that they were not violent and they would like the government to stop treating them that way. And they made a representation to the University of the West Indies. At that time, the chancellor was Sir Arthur Lewis. And Sir Arthur Lewis asked Rex Nettleford and two other professors at UWI to go and do some work among the Rastas. And they went and did their study of the Rastas and came back with the conclusion that the Rastas were not violent people because the society had developed this notion that Rastafarians were violent. That is what Explainer was talking about. You know, Leonard Howell, the founder, they thought he was violent because he wouldn't talk when they asked him a question in court. You know, and for them, that was violence. The Rastafari. And so Nettleford came back, and then the government of Jamaica paid money for a delegation. Well, not the government, the university, sorry, paid the passage for a delegation of Rasta to visit Africa, and they visit several African countries. And that would have spurred Selassie visited in 1966. I don't think that Jamaica, that Rastafarian is an official religion in Jamaica today. It's still not. But of course, Jamaica benefits from the Rastafarian movement, and we all. We've come a long way. We always thought that Rastas were nasty, Rastas were this, Rastas were that, and so on. The cultural movement of our Caribbean. Good evening. A little bit of history there, a little bit of history there. Welcome to Politics 101. Please share the link. Please share the link. Let them know that we're on. We're on. History as a way of rolling on, moving forward. And we see glimpses, and sometimes more than glimpses, of past history in present history, because history is really his story. And sometimes if we don't learn the stories of the past, you know, we can't make sense of a lot that we see in the present. We can't. And so it's very important for us to have a sense of our history to really understand what's happening here. Of course, we have a government in Guyana that has no respect for history, doesn't care about it, and in many senses have begun to rewrite history, certainly African history, you know? And so we have to be conscious. We have to be conscious of our history as we move forward. There are lots of talk about extradition and so forth that is going on, and a lot of people are expending a lot of energy on it, and one understandably so. And pardon me if I do not expend a lot of energy on the matter. I've stated my position very clearly that the business of who smuggled what and who smuggled what and who didn't smuggle what, it's a business of the government, and I'm interested in the government and the government role. And I am I am not convinced yet because the government is promising to sing on Mohammed, and Mohammed is promising to sing on the government. And they ain't singing yet. And that's when I would become interested. You know, for me, this as of now, I'm treating the matter of the Mohammeds as a private matter. I know young Mohammed is now in politics. He's now a parliamentarian, and so is, you know, the private becomes public in many regards. But I still see that when I hear the government role, then I'm ready to engage this issue. And that is why I am not spending the money on it. I understand that there is an aspect of Guyanese political culture that stands with the underdog. And I see a lot of people who are not necessarily supporters of Mohammed standing with him as the underdog. And I understand that aspect of Guyanese political instinct, you know, so that doesn't throw me over the sky. Guyanese are always, especially African Guyanese, because African Guyanese have been the underdogs, we tend to have a long nose, when it comes to bad treatment and underdog treatment. And so I understand that there is some people are saying to me, Dr. Hines, look how Black people are, you know, validating, you know, someone who rapes the treasury, you know. And these are some Indian people are telling me that too. More Indian people are telling me than Black people. And of course, it's something that we have to grapple with. We have to grapple with the nuance in political instinct. We have to grapple with the plurality of African political instinct. It's not a linear thing. More than many groups in the world, Black people tend to be much broader in terms of their political instincts and their political culture. They're more likely to step outside of the tribe on what they consider to be matters of principle, you know? And sometimes people are confused by that, you know? I would argue it's not something that is permanent, you know? There's what you may call a pull-push factor in the way human beings respond to the world around them. And certainly it is so in the African. And there's a lot of angst, a lot of anxiety around the way African Guyanese voted, the way they are defending Mohammed and so on and things. And I don't think that they're defending wrong. They're defending the wrongs, the alleged wrongs of Mohammed. I think they recognize that we have a government that is using state power to silence its opponents. And I think that is what they're responding to. They're responding really to the government and the way in which they perceive the government is going after Mohammed. And I think that is the big factor here. And a lot of our commentators are not keen in on that, you know, that there is a great distrust of the PPP government by African Guyanese. And I would say even the handful of African Guyanese who vote for the PPP are distrustful of them. Because if you talk to them, they will tell you they basically are doing, if you can't beat them, join them. And the PPP, I think a lot of I'm not sure that Jack Dio is fooled. I think Jack Dio has more sense than 5,000 of them in the PPP put together. I think Jack Dio understands that African people don't love the PPP. and that what he's doing is trying to capture them for votes. He started out by trying to capture them to defend the PPP. That is, what they're now calling scrapeheads. And Jacques recognized that Jagan had said about the 1960s that the PPP was in office but not in power because they couldn't govern in Georgetown, because that's not where their followers live. And I think when they came back to power, people like Jack Dew and them decided, look, the enablers of the PNC, that they were going to use enticements to get them, hence the so-called phantom groups. So Jack Dew went there, the Jack Dew government went there, and then they moved from the phantom groups now to this money. And so it's a matter of survival. But Jack Dew, I think, understands that African people don't necessarily like the PPP politically. When Jagan died in 1997 and they were moving the body from Georgetown to Babujan, they were stopping in the Indian communities. And when they got to Buxton, they were passing, and the people in Buxton said, no, you're not passing here, you're going to stop here, because he was the president of Guyana. And the Buxtonians stopped the procession, and I think they might have opened the coffin and for them to see him. But they were not PPP. But is that part of their instinct for fairness? And I where I stand on the issue of race being better than another race, and that's racism, and one race superior. But there is a difference. There are differences among ethnic groups, and the differences come out of the different experience. Having experienced slavery, Africans have a different attitude to the general humanity. There were people, there were white people, as you all know, who helped in the abolition movement. The village that I come from here, Buxton, was named after Thomas Fowell Buxton. He was a white MP in England, and he, along with Thomas Clarkson and others, fought to end slavery in the British Empire. And so, when these people bought the land there, it was original song, an old cotton plantation. Buxton was an old cotton plantation. And, they bought the land. We go buy them. When the man say you sell the land, they put their money in a wheelbarrow and tell them, we go buy them. And they bought the land and turned it into Buxton. And they named it after Thomas Fowell Buxton. The Victorians, the first village, named it after Queen Victoria. And you see, it's that gratefulness instinct among Africans that sometimes people confuse it, and so, that's their attitude. And I think we are seeing some of it here in the Mohammed thing. You see why I like this class? Colin is reminding me that I left out William Wilberforce, the third abolitionist in the British Parliament. We had a teacher named Mr. Gill from Pleasance, short man. I think he taught us in third standard. And he used to carry us at the village office to go through the archives, because all the books were there. I must find out what they do with those things. And he taught us, he said, Thomas Fowell Buxton, Thomas Clarkson, and William Wilberforce, sharp man, Mr. Gill, from Pleasance. We were in, I think, second standard. Yes, I think we were second and third, because third standard was Miss Trim. Second standard was Kofi and Mr. Gill, I think, in second standard. So we were mere 6, 7 years old, and he was going to the market square, the village office, going up there and teaching us about Thomas Fowell Buxton. I can hear him now. Thomas Clarkson and William Wilberforce. I think he came back and he taught us in high school too, Mr. Gill. But thank you, Colin, for reminding me of William Wilberforce. And so, there's always that thing among Africans. But don't misunderstand it for loyalty. It's gratefulness. And I think the PPP is getting away that, a few Africans have voted for them and more Africans voted for Mohammed, and they're all celebrating what they call the end of racial voting. How can it be the end of racial voting when they didn't vote for the designated Indian party? Or when the other race didn't vote against its designated Indian party? Its designated Indian party. That is, the other race didn't vote for the designated black party. And in celebrating, they not realize what they're doing. What they're doing is celebrating what they see as the dismantling of black consciousness. And they're cussing me every day and night. Their times is stuck in the past. He's stuck in the 70s. And the 70s, 60s and 70s was the era of civil rights, the era of black power. And these people are celebrating the end of black power, black empowerment. I mean, what can be more racist than that? You are taking people's struggle for liberation and you are planting it in a period of time and stopping it there. You're saying that black people are not dynamic, they don't bring forward their experience, but they do. The Black Power movement started in the 60s and the 70s. It wasn't the first Black Power movement. Many in America would remember the Harlem Renaissance, the great African Enlightenment period. And there are always going to be Black Power movements. There have always been. The Pan-African movement began at the turn of the 20th century, when countries in Africa were colonized. Now they're in the same boat as West Indians. We are now all colonized against our will. And so there's the formation of the what? Pan-African movement. All-African movement. That's a Black Power movement. Garvey joined that movement, started the Garveyite movement. Garvey came to America, went to America around 1915, I think, to meet Booker T. Washington, because he admired some of Booker T's philosophy. But when he got there, he found out Booker T had died, and he stayed in America and created the largest Black Power movement called the Garveyite movement up until the Civil Rights Movement. So how are you going to stop the flow of liberation? And so for them, Black liberation in Guyana stopped in the 60s and 70s. And there is where David Hinds is stuck. And that is why it's dangerous. That black people now have no desire anymore for black power, for black liberation. Black people are gone to the dogs. That is what those jackasses are saying. And I resent them for that. Resent them for a lot of things which I can forgive them for. But these are people who are celebrating what they think is the loss of consciousness of a great people. They're celebrating what they think is a disconnection of people from their history. And they're beating those of us who are saying we've got to connect to our history. How worse can you get? I resent them politically. Politically, I resent them. I don't resent them as human beings. I don't come from such a culture. I still respect their humanity, but I resent them politically for what they are doing to black people. And some of them are conscious of it. Some of them are unconscious. They're celebrating it and talking nonsense about the PNC is going to die. What they mean is that black consciousness is dying. And it's not the first time. I've mentioned here the extinction theory. Josiah Nutt and other people of the 19th century, they said black people will eventually become extinct because they're of lesser human value. And here these people are talking about the extinction of the black man. Not physically, but mentally. That's what they're talking about. So when they babble about PNC, they know PNC ain't dying nowhere. PNC is an organization. Burnham used to say, if you get rid of me, another Rasta going to take my place. And they never like Burnham and all the Rastas that take your place. So they're now saying Aubrey Norton is the worst thing ever. Well, they say that about Burnham, and they say that about Height, and they say that about Caribbean and all the others. No black leader will suffice to them. They tried to get Norton to condemn me. Norton didn't do it. And what they end up doing, they end up saying Norton worse than me. That's what they can't come to me with that nonsense about condemning a black leader. I am critical of black leadership, but I will not condemn a black man. And they won't come to me with that nonsense because they know where I will tell them to go and shove it. Because at the time when you are trying to bury black people, I am not going to bury another black leader. Will not do it. But they think that the black middle class political leaders are fragile and fickle. So they work on them. They work on them. They work on me. I working on them. I don't know where they get. But I know what my African culture has given me. And that's what these jackasses are doing. Impoverish black people, and get some black people to move them sideways. And they're seeing that sideways thing as capture. They're not using the word, but that's what they mean. We have captured them. We have subdued them. And they feel that people like us are in the way. Well, yes, I want to disturb my neighbor. I want to disturb my neighbor on this. And wherever I go, whatever the forum, and we're going to remind Guyana about what it is doing to the darkest of its children. And that's the fight. That's the fight we're having. Somebody said the WPA didn't brought, well, I will excuse the language, any votes to APNU. You see, they reduce black people to votes. They reduce black people to vote. And as I said last night, the mistake we made on our side is that we did not link black victimhood to the vote. We did not say to black people, you're oppressed, and black people know they're oppressed. You're living in an apartheid state, and black people know they're living in an apartheid state. But what we didn't say to them is that that must influence your vote. The other side tell them all the time, burn and ban flour, burn and ban this, you couldn't make roti, you will go to jail if you make pillory. The other side tell their young people that. And we on this side make ourselves, we try to be nice. That's the thing about us Afro-Saxons, you know. We want the world to see us as, you know, fair people. Well, the other side, demonizing Burnham, demonizing the PNC, and so minimizing the number of Indians who are going to have anything to do with the PNC. So when they say APNU is PNC, what they're doing is saying, don't worry with them, the rest of them. All of them is the devil. They know that up north didn't appoint me. The PNC got 11 parliamentarians, the WPA get 1 in the 12. But they say the 12 PNC parliamentarians. And they know why they're doing that. Because the party that I come from, the WPA, doesn't have that tag of the devil. They haven't managed to attach the devil to it. But they've attached the devil to it. So when they say all of we are PNC, it's ready to tell Indian people, all of us are devils. You see, in politics, you have to listen to the other side. Always. In ethnic societies, groups compare themselves with each other. They compare themselves. Indian people compare themselves with Africans, Africans compare themselves with Indians. That's a fact. And now Amerindians are coming more and more into the mix. It's a fact. But when they get some of our black people to say, oh, race is not a problem, race is not the problem, you know, and then they're laughing at you when you say that, because they know race is the issue. And they don't have to say race, because they are not an original race. Africans are a race, black and white. East Indians are part of the color code by default, the brown, but they did not experience slavery. So when you're talking about the fundamentals of race, East Indians are not a race. In fact, they left Guyana as Indians, and when they land at Kennedy, they become black in America. It's when they get to America they become black. Because America got 2 races, black and white. Everything else got to be either white or black. It's only South Africa that had created a 3rd race that is colored. But although they talk about biracial in America, biracial is not a race. It's not listed officially. South Africa is the only one that listed colored as the 3rd race. And so that is the grand plan that they're playing on black people. And you all got to realize what they're doing. They're taking away all the tools that people use to fight for freedom. They're taking it away from you. They're taking away the streets from you. You almost know that slavery meant that you couldn't walk the streets. No set black people couldn't walk more than 3 people at a time. There were some enslaved people. They call them, these are the people who would go from plantation to plantation and look after the machines. Industrial slaves, they call them. And so they could walk from plantation to plantation. But the rest of Africans could not be on the road. And so emancipation means the right to be on the road. That's why Kitchener in 1963 said the road make to walk on Carnival Day. Council don't know, but I have to say, any steel band man venture to cross my path is a long funeral to the Royal Hospital. Simplistic people say talking about death and so on. But he's talking about the freedom to be on the road. Bob Marley said, why can't we roam this open space? Why can't we roam this open space? Getting out of slavery is the freedom to walk the open space. In the 1930s, Critchlow and Cipriani and Butler and all of them, they brought people on the road, on the road. The open space. Why can't we roam this open space? Bob Marley singing that during the curfew in the 1970s in Jamaica when Michael Manley called a curfew. Roadblock. I got to throw away my herb stock. Why can't we roam this open space? And they've gotten us to temporarily surrender that open space. And that's why they think they get me where they want me. We have to go to the ballot box because at the end of the day, in a society that is not caught up in revolution, the ballot box determines who governs. So we have to get there. But the ballot box is not an end in itself. The ballot box is a procedure. It's procedural democracy. It's a procedure. It's a means towards an end. And the end is freedom. The end is not winning an election. That is the path. You can win an election, but if you don't generate freedom, then the election becomes anti-freedom. And they fool us sometimes. Somebody saying that Kofi must be turning in his grave to see what we have become. I hope he's not turning in his grave yet, because I'm saying part of the condition we find ourselves in is temporary. I think so. I think it's temporary. But it's sad. To some extent. It's sad to some extent. And there is responsibility to be shared. It's not just the younger people, because we have a responsibility to younger people to have them walk in line with their history. And in many instances, we have surrendered it. They tell me, oh, David Hines playing Calypso. The young people don't want to hear Calypso. The young people want to hear bam, 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 bam. They're glad for young people to be listening to some of the lawless music, as we call it. Lawless music was always there. Don't believe that it's only now you get lawless music. You get lawless music in the from creation. But maybe the problem with this generation is that it's only lawless music. or mostly the artist music they're listening to. There is some of the one-man band and thing. They do play some of the old African folk songs, Keme Baka Me Muma Country, etc., etc. So we have to be very careful. So when they bring these outside artists for our young people to go at the place and get on bad, they know what they're doing. And it's okay to go and get on bad. Nothing is wrong. The mighty Duke said, get on radical. Nothing is wrong with that. But you must be connected to the other aspects of our culture. And that is where I think we are failing our people. Because it's almost a fear to say Africa, to say black, because you fear Jack Joe will call you racist. Jack Joe can call me a racist till the cows come home. I fear not Jack Joe. And Jack Joe cannot define me. I will not allow Jack Joe to define me. And I'm afraid that some of our black political leaders are allowing the Jack Joes of this world to define them. Every time Jack Joe calls me a racist, he helps my cause. Because he's alerting black people that there is someone or a group of people who have an alternative view to the one that he and his government is pushing. Every time he calls, he helps our cause. Because he's pointing me out to his people. So I have to define me. And that's what more of our leaders have to say. We have to say, you will not define me. Bob Marley says, we are what we are, and that's the way it's going to be. You can't educate I for no equal opportunity. Talking about my freedom, my people's freedom, that's what I am talking about. Jack Joe, well, you know how I feel about some of the others. They define me. They define me. If I allow you to define me, then I'm making Kofi turn in his grave. And my auntie will cuss me nasty from her grave if she believes that I'm allowing the likes of Jack Joe to define me. You call me a racist, I'm going to wear it with a badge of honor. I wear it that shaky and let it mean something. I'm going in your parliament with my African wear. In your parliament. That's what I'm talking about. You throw me out, you throw Africa out. Oh no. That's the defiance. I'm not going there with no white man suit. Let's talk. Let's talk. I am making a statement to my people and ultimate to you that you are going to see African resistance in the halls of the National Assembly. We've got to fight back in this country. In the time of revolution, we fight revolution in 1763. When Brother Malcolm said by any means necessary, he wasn't talking about one means. He was talking any means. We are fighting on this platform. That's revolution in our time. If we have to take to the streets, we're going to do that. If it's necessary. We can argue among ourselves when it's necessary. But I am not making you define me. And I'm not making you define African people if I have a voice, and I do have a voice. I am going to remind you that black people will be respected in this country. If you all want to cuss me down, you all can cuss me down in there. Me and gonna cuss you all back there. But me mouth the left in me mama belly. I'll cuss you all back outside. Let this message go far and wide, because they're listening, and I want them to listen. I want them to listen. They have to listen to me, because we represent something that is part of the Guyanese tradition. It is the radical tradition. Radical means that we get to the root. Radical means we get to the root. We celebrate the Rastas tonight. Marcus Garvey, Leonard Howell, His Majesty Haile Selassie, and all the millions of Rastafarians. The greatest cultural movement of the 20th century. It's black cultural movement, but period, the greatest culture, awaken the consciousness of our people. We celebrate them tonight because we are all Rastas. We are all Rastafarians. And we don't stop fighting. We don't stop fighting. Some of us are being misled, but there are always, to be misled is to be human. And sometimes, we have to cuss and so on, but then stand firm the next day. Stand firm the next day. The logic of freedom takes us to a place where sometimes the recipients of freedom take freedom for granted. Take freedom for granted. And we play around with it. That vote cannot be worth $40,000 or $50,000 or $60,000. It cannot. That's the price you are putting on the legacy of coffee. $40,000? Oh no. Is that the legacy you put in on your grandmothers, foremothers, foreparents, the founders of Victoria and Queenstown and Boston and Pleasance? That's the price you put in? $40,000? Black man, catch yourself. And I ain't stopping telling you all that. Catch yourself. Mohammed and Jack Dio dare not go to Indians and put $40,000 in their hand. Dare not. They will not disrespect them like that. They will not go to Indians, build a house, see 8,000 people in a village, 5,000 people in a village, build 5 houses, and tell the rest of Indians, vote for me. And now you're going to get house like that. They can't go to Indians and tell them that. Why do they think they can come to Africans and tell us that? Because partly we allow ourselves to appear vulnerable. Black man, catch yourself. I still walk around the African villages to see the houses that Muhammad built for them. All right, you all get cock, you all get fool. I still love you all. I still love you all. But God tell you all get tech. We're moving on and we are fighting. Fight we must. If you fight, I've been dead like Miss Willie's goat. If I win a fight, I'll be dead like Miss Willie's goat. We got dead. We got dead bad. That's what dead like Miss Willie's goat mean. And we got dead bad. We're coming back tomorrow night, always.